Well, as part of Africa Day celebrations, the Thabo Mbeki annual lecture will for the first time be delivered outside South African soil in Guinea. Let's now take you live now to our international news editor, Sophie Mukwena, who is standing by with the former president. Over to you, Sophie.
Well, thank you, Unat. Indeed, we are here in Guinea, Conakry, where on Saturday we are going to listen to a professor. He's actually a person from this region, the West Africa region. He is going to deliver a Thabo Mbeki Africa lecture. You know, every year this time around there's a lecture. And in relation to the lecture often looked at issues that are related to the African continent, but of course, there's no way we can ignore issues that are related to South Africa, as South Africa is part of the continent. Thank you so much, former President Thabo Mbeki, for your time. You are in Guinea, Conakry. Why Guinea?
Well, as you've said, Sophie, we are here to broadcast the annual Africa Day lecture. But before I come to that, I must say a happy Africa Day to all of the SABC viewers and listeners, because today is Africa Day. And then the happy Africa Day to all of them, and I hope all of us will be reflecting on the matter as to where we want our continent to be tomorrow and what we do about it, which is why we're in Guinea. The Africa Day lecture is being held in Guinea because for some years already, the Africa and the rest of the continent has been saying to us the Africa Day lecture does not belong to South Africa. So we must not only deliver it from South Africa, but deliver it also from other African countries. So that's why we're in Guinea. As the first time, this is lecture number 13, first time that we deliver it in an African country which is outside, other than South Africa. So it's important, and fortunately, you remember also that Miriam Makeba, the late, lived here in Guinea for many years. This was her second home. So we thought it was sort of important to commemorate her. So on the same, after the lecture, there will be a concert to commemorate. It's in her name, in Miriam's name. Guinea has a particular history in terms of our struggle. As far as I know, it's the only country on the continent which had on its syllabus from primary school up to university the South African struggle. So the Guineans, the population, they grow up with this. They know everything about our struggle, about the ANC, about Mandela, about Tambo, and all of these people, in order to generate that kind of engagement of the masses of the Guinean people in that struggle to end apartheid. So it's the only country I know on the continent which actually made it part of the syllabus of the students. As I say, from primary to university, to ensure you empower the population to participate in the struggle to end apartheid. So we thought that the first time we're coming out of South Africa to the continent, Guinea would be an appropriate place.
Last year, former President Mbeki, I remember very well the person who was delivering this lecture, the professor. It was a thought-provoking lecture. Particularly, it looks like she saw what was coming, that it looks like the AU is struggling to deal with challenges facing the continent. It's time to reflect. The Sudan crisis, you have been involved as the chair of the AU high-level panel on Sudan, on Darfur, in fact, but you know the situation there. What's happening in Sudan? Why can't Africa be able to resolve the Sudan question?
Well, when this conflict broke out, Sophie, between these two armed groups, not armed groups, they are armed formations, both of them official of Sudan, the Sudan Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces. The regional organization, IGAD, acted immediately, constituted a committee of heads of state to engage with the Sudanese to stop this fighting. But those generals did not listen. They didn't listen to the regional body. So in the end, the Americans originally intervened to ensure, to evacuate their own people. But in the end, they teamed up with the Saudi Arabia to negotiate this current agreement of a limited cessation of hostilities to enable humanitarian assistance to be delivered. The summit of the African Peace and Security Council is taking place on Saturday, 2 days hence, same day as we deliver the lecture. It's meeting, the PSC is meeting at summit level because the interventions by the regional organizations have not succeeded, so the continental organization is now intervening. And we're hoping that it will take a decision about that conflict which goes beyond merely humanitarian assistance. So the humanitarian assistance must take place. But in the end, they've got to address the fundamental issue, which was to ensure that Sudan becomes a truly democratic country. The negotiations were interrupted, were disrupted. So they must go back there, address humanitarian issue. Let's go back to this matter of making sure that Sudan becomes a democratic country.
Do you get a sense that the two generals are committed to peace talks? I mean, there was, ceasefire, many ceasefires, and unfortunately, fighting continue.
Well, I can only hope so, Sophie, that they are committed to this because they participated, both of these, in the removal of President Bashir. They teamed up with the civilians to constitute the transitional government. And they agreed, all of them, that the reason, the task, central task of this interim government made up of the military and the civilians would be to take Sudan to democracy. They all agreed. They've got to go back there. And so I must assume that they were committed when they made that commitment, they were being honest. And that they have not changed their minds on that, because in the end, Sudan cannot be ruled by the military. The population will reject that. So there's no, if any of the generals think that they are conducting this war between themselves in order that one of them becomes the permanent ruler of Sudan, it's a false hope. It won't work. So, but the AU must assist them to come back to this issue of a final status negotiation.
Let's turn to the Great Lakes region. You were involved in ensuring that the Congolese, there was a dialogue in Sun City. The eastern part is still at war. Why can't the regional body, IGAD, but also the Great Lakes region in general, and SADC also, because the DRC is part of the SADC region, work together to ensure that there's a permanent solution to that conflict in the eastern part of the DRC? And why is taking so long? What's taking so long for that conflict to be dealt with?
The origin of the problem is in the eastern Congo, of this conflict. It comes from the Mobutu years, when the Mobutu regime refused to recognize the Banyamulenge, the Rwandan-speaking population of the eastern Congo, as Congolese. As when you then started having a militia formed to drive this Banyamulenge out of the Congo into Rwanda. And so long as the central authority in Kinshasa does not regard some of the people in the east as Congolese, so long will the conflict continue. It's not external, it's internal to the Congo. as you know, the Kivus in the east are very far from Kinshasa. The country is very big. Where you have government collapsing in the Congo during the Mobutu years, the collapse becomes total as far as the east is concerned. So the local populations who've been told that these Banyamulenge are foreigners, they form militia to attack people. That problem has to be solved by the government of the Congo. It's critical. The Congolese government must take responsibility to say we are Congolese together. There are no Banyamulenge in the Congo who are foreigners. So anybody who tries to do anything to threaten the Banyamulenge, we, the government of the Congo, will act against that. The problem would be solved.
You spoke earlier on about the Peace and Security Council with all the instruments that can be used to ensure that there are all early warning systems. The situation in Eswatini, the SADC region itself, there are challenges. But it looks like the regional body is not doing enough to ensure that you don't find a situation where the region is unstable. We already have a problem in Cabo Delgado.
Well, we, as a foundation, we were asked by many people in Eswatini to engage the matter. So we sent in a team there. It's spoken to everybody in Eswatini, the government, the political parties, civil organizations. What's the problem? What's the solution? And as of now, we are standing by to report to His Majesty the King. We've seen everybody. I told him, the King, that I was going to do that, to talk to the people of Eswatini. So we're waiting for that appointment to go and report to the King to say this is what the population said to us, and therefore a solution must be found in that context. And I believe that SADC would support that, because SADC is very keenly interested that this Eswatini, the problem Eswatini must be solved. I think they would support that, but as far as we are concerned, we are really awaiting that report back meeting to His Majesty the King.
Let's look at South Africa. Earlier on, you spoke about the leadership, the challenges of leadership on the continent. Back at home, earlier on, you spoke about your concerns around issues related to service delivery. And one can cite an example of the electricity right now, and that this is a recipe for disaster if you don't resolve problems that are affecting ordinary people in South Africa. In your view, are we working very hard as a country to ensure that the concerns of the citizens are addressed? I mean, I'm talking about the MPC meeting today. I mean, people are squeezed.
I know. I know, Sophie. I think it's very clear that there are many things must be done. For instance, take the question of the economy. You know that in 2020, the government, the business, labor, civil society, everybody said, we must come together in a social compact, agree on a program to address these challenges that we're facing in South Africa. Agreed. The task, therefore, is for us, the social partners, to sit and work on the detail. They've tried. They've been meeting, at least. But nothing has come out of it. There must be a reason for that. Business have now said to government, rather than wait for a conclusion of a comprehensive social compact, while we're negotiating that, let us do with some limited programs. They have presented that proposal to government, and hopefully government, as I'm told, the president has accepted that. Okay, we'll work together on this 6-pack while we continue with the broader negotiations. We need to move on that. So, as a foundation, all we can do is to urge people to act. And so we'll engage the government, we'll engage business to say, is there anything that we can do to undo the blockages if there are any? But it's clear that we are not moving fast enough. If we take a decision, correct decision, in 2020, the problems are too big to be handled by government alone, or business alone, or labor alone. Let's all get together. Very, very correct. And yet in 2023, we still have nothing. It means there's something we're not doing.
The issue of electricity?
I was saying to somebody else that, you see, many of these problems require very careful study to understand practically and honestly what is happening, what the problem is, in order to find right answers. I was saying, for instance, the government took a decision in 2004. It's in the State of the Nation address in 2004 that we must now, ESCOM must build new power stations. 2004. Those power stations were Kusile and Mitupi. We have not finished Kusile up to now. That's 19 years later. Well, how do you explain that? So somebody needs to look at that in a focused way. How do you explain this? You can't take 19 years to finish a power station. It's because somebody did not want the power station to be finished. Deliberate, conscious. So we must find that out in order to be able to move.
Let's look at global issues. The war in Ukraine. You are familiar with politics of the Soviet Union, and now you have Ukraine, you have Russia. Your foundation has been communicating with the Russian Federation officials on issues related to food security. Is there a commitment? Do you get a sense that President Vladimir Putin and President Zelensky can engage in talks, judging from the statement that the 6 leaders from the continent will be going to Kyiv and Moscow to try and engage the 2 leaders? You know Putin very well, I know, Mr. President.
So they must engage from the African perspective. The first thing to do is to stop the firing of the guns, to create a space for negotiations. Because the security issues that are raised by Russia, by Ukraine, are legitimate. Both countries want to make sure that they are in the right security framework. You can't get there by shooting at each other. So we must go, the Africans must say, stop the shooting. To give space to discuss what is the problem and what is the solution must come from them. Centrally must address this matter of the security. Because naturally the Russians feel threatened. So you must remember that during the Second World War, the Russians lost at least 25 million people as a result of that war. So when they say, why is NATO advancing to our borders? It's a concern they have because they remember this history. Germany attacked them in 1941. 25 million people died. Now you have this military organization which is marching towards you. Of course they will say, but we don't want another 25 million Russians dying. So those are the things that need to be discussed and solutions found.
Mr. President, on the issue of US and NATO, the ambassador of the United States of America raised concerns around the ANC resolution in relation to global issues and pointed out that the Russian vessel that was in South Africa, Lady R, did come to South Africa to pick up arms. Do you think his concerns were justified? What's your analysis on that issue?
No, I mean, if the US ambassador had spoken to me, I would have said two things. One, the law in South Africa does not allow for the export of weapons to countries that are in conflict. It's illegal. So I doubt it. I don't think it happened. If it happened, whoever is responsible must be charged criminally. The second thing I would say, as far as I know, the South Africa armaments industry does not produce the sophisticated weapons that the Russians are using. There's no weapon that the Russians would want to buy from South Africa.
Does this remind you of Iraq, weapons of mass destruction?
Sure. I mean, the issue about the weapons of mass destruction, that one is, I think, even better or worse, in that we sent inspectors, arms inspectors, to talk to Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi government. The same people who had handled this disarmament in South Africa. When South Africa dropped its atom bomb, chemical and biological weapons, we sent those people to assist the Iraqis to do the same thing. And they sent a report, we sent a report to the UN Secretary General to say there are no mass weapons of destruction, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They had that report, and yet they went to war. And they find that there were no weapons as we had sent to them. So there was a particular political commitment. They wanted to get rid of Saddam Hussein. In reality, this thing about weapons of mass destruction was an excuse. But I'm saying with regard to this one, the conflict between the reason the ANC discusses the matter in this resolution is because that conflict didn't just pop up on a Monday. There's a history to it. And the ANC was trying to draw attention to the history so that you then address the solutions. What are the correct solutions given this history? And I think that's a legitimate. Somebody may query, may say this account of yours is wrong. But what they were trying to do was to make sure that we have a comprehensive understanding of this matter so that you then come to the correct conclusions.
And finally, Mr. President, South Africa will be hosting the BRICS Summit. You were very vocal during your tenure that there must be a strong cooperation from the South-South. Now we have BRICS, which is almost similar to South-South. But there's this issue. Again, President Vladimir Putin, the president of the Russian Federation, whom you know very well, there's a warrant of arrest against him. Do you think President Putin will come to South Africa, but also the issue of this warrant of arrest? How should the government or the authorities handle this matter? Based on our experience with Omar al-Bashir, you spoke about the International Criminal Court being the court of the last resort.
In South Africa, as you say, is the current chair of BRICS for this year. So South Africa must discharge its responsibilities as the chair of BRICS. The one problematic program in terms of that whole annual program is the summit, because of the reasons that you state. Because I do not think that the South African government would ever agree to arrest President Putin because of his membership of this ICC process. I don't think that will happen. So I think these BRICS countries must agree either to hold the summit chaired by South Africa in one of the BRICS countries outside South Africa, or hold it virtually. Because I'm quite sure we can't say to President Putin, please come to South Africa, and then arrest him. At the same time, we can't say, come to South Africa and not arrest him, because we're defying our own law. We can't behave as a lawless government. So I'm saying the BRICS leaders must agree. Either we hold the summit in one of our other countries, not South Africa, or virtually, but the summit must be held, chaired by South Africa. But I don't think it can take place face-to-face in South Africa because of this problem.
How do you finally deal with ICC to avoid these kinds of challenges? We saw it with former President al-Bashir.
Well, what is critically important, Sophie, for the continent is that the continent must establish this African Court of Justice, which has been agreed in principle. And the protocol has been agreed. But the countries are very slow in terms of ratifying the content so that then the court can be set up. That's what needs to happen. We need to ensure that Africa does this so that we're not then threatened by the ICC. The people who commit these offenses detailed in the Rome Statute can then appear before the African Court of Justice. So we don't have to go to the ICC. That's fundamentally what needs to be done. South Africa has a duty to really to persuade its fellow member states of the AU to ratify this thing so that we stop complaining about the ICC, because we've got capacity on the continent to deal with all of these criminal offenses. I think that's what needs to happen.
Thank you for your time, Mr. President. We're looking forward to the lecture on Saturday.
And the concert.
And the concert, of course. I saw Simpiwe, and I saw Simpiwe.
Yes,
I can't wait to see you taking the dance floor.
Well, so they have not invited me to sing. Not yet. They may do.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks for your time. That was former President Thabo Mbeki speaking to the SABC in Guinea-Conakry. Back to you, Unachi.